Hi. We're going to continue lesson one. And before I get going, I think the last time I kind of like forgot, but if you can please like and subscribe if you enjoy the Bible studies that I've been doing. That will kind of help me out to try to get my YouTube channel a little bit further noticed, whatever, on YouTube. Right now, like I said, I'm still pretty nervous. I've never done this before, and this is all kind of new to me, kind of venturing out. So I'm going to start. We're going to continue and go into the second dispensation, which is the conscience. And the last time we kind of like touched bases on Adam and Eve and being kind of kicked out of the Garden of Eden and how sin kind of came into the world because of their disobedience with what God had commanded them not to do. So we're kind of going to go into Adam and Eve, where now that they're out of the garden, they're having to till the ground. Eve is beginning to have children, and she had Cain and Abel were born. So we're going to kind of start from there. So on a damp, chilly evenings, the family would gather around the fireside. Adam and Eve would tell their children, Cain and Abel, of how life used to be in the garden, how God's full pleasure shone upon them, and of the joy of the fellowship with God. All the world was at peace then. The words enemy, fear, pain, and danger were unknown. They didn't even know those words. But then the terrible day of disobedience dawned. Their sin was no secret, for all could see its results. Their parents had been molded by the hands of God. They had not been, nor had been, any other of the billions to be born. All mankind would be born according to the laws of nature. They would not be shapen from dampened dust, nor taken from the ribs of one in deep sleep. No doubt they longed for the day when the curse would be removed. Eve said upon Cain's birth, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And we read Genesis chapter 4, verses 1, and it said, Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. When her pain and labor had been forgotten, she remembered the promise so well spoken to her by God after the fall. The seed of the woman shall bruise the head of the serpent. How she must have dreamed and hoped that this child would cancel and recall the curse which was fallen upon them. And Adam's sons must have wondered how long it would be before the curse would be lifted. Will we ever be permitted in the garden again? I'm sure they must have had talks of ways to please God. They were anxious for his displeasure to pass away. Cain and Abel, the firstborns to Adam and Eve, are representative of the opposing seeds. Adam, or Abel, I'm sorry, was righteous, while Cain was of the wicked one. The Cain spirit never ends until the seed of the woman returns to set up his kingdom on earth, and his adversary, that's the wicked one, is cast into the lake of fire. And the wicked one is we're referring to Satan or the serpent. In the process of time, Cain and Abel brought their respective offerings to the Lord. Cain offered the fruit of the ground, while Abel brought an offering of atonement made by faith. No doubt Adam, their father, had told them of the story of the fall and its tragic consequences, but Cain, with indifferent heart, came his own way with the fruit of a cursed earth and without humility or faith. God had no respect for his offering. but accepted Abel's offering. The reason God acknowledged Abel's offering is because it takes the shedding of blood to remit sins. Abel heard that God required a sacrifice. Faith comes by hearing and not by fancy. And we read Hebrews chapter 11, verse 4. It says, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. So Cain basically kills Abel. And I'm going to read Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 16. So it's kind of long of where we'll be going. It says, in Cain, Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee his desires, and thou shalt rule over him. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood cried unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thine hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not be henceforth yet unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken upon him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. So at this point, Cain kills Abel. So jealousy basically had came up, along with wounded pride that you can see in the eyes of Cain. It is as scary as if a madman were to peek at you through a window, as it is to looking into the eyes filled with jealousy and hate. We want to cry out, Cain, why act that way? Why not humble yourself and ask God what is wrong? Why not do as Abel is doing, if that pleases God? Then without warning, there came a sound that neither Cain nor Abel had ever heard. Their mother and their father had often spoken of it. It was the voice of God speaking to man. Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou dost not well, sin lieth at the door, which we read earlier. So what I've already read, Genesis 6-7 is basically the first time that the word sin was spoken. It is sad, horrible note all through the Bible. God is warning Cain against future sins. Cain had already displeased God by the spirit in which he brought his offering. If thou dost not well, sin lieth, literally croucheth at the door. There are humanity's doors crouching, waiting. Sin was. What a picture of sin and temptation that was. If I had ever seen a wild beast, a tiger or panther, watching us, crouching, its body low to the ground, ready to make a cruel spring on my child or a friend or whoever, I would never forget it. Now God himself is tenderly explaining to Cain, sin is like a crouching beast. It's ready to pounce. Cain, sin is watching you, waiting for you, ready to spring on you at the first opportunity. And that's how sin kind of creeps in our lives. You know, it's always waiting there for us to make a mistake, for it can pounce on us. And then we've got Genesis 7, which just kind of continues, but which I've already read. And so sin desires to have you. What a sermon God is preaching to man. How carefully God warns Cain against the dangers of future sin. And actually, this sermon is directed to every one of us too. It is a strong, clear, tender warning. How many millions will ignore it? Cain will, Solomon, Judas, and Peter will. Sin is so dangerous because a sin once committed seems to love that sinner with a kind of triggerous, murderous ferocity. It is God's way of telling us that sin seeks to repeat itself. One man said, "It is easier to find one who has never committed a sin than to find one who has never committed the same sin twice." Hearing the voice of God, Cain should have fallen to his knees, but no. His angry mind became even angrier. So God not only refuses my offering, but even tells me my whole attitude is wrong. Well, I'll handle things my way. He refused to admit that he had not done well, and that his life needed improvement. Cain's bitterness screamed and pounded at his mind. Bitterness is like a poison that spreads all over the body system. Violence gathered like a hurricane in his mind. We don't know how much time passed after God's warning. Maybe one day, maybe many. The Bible just says one day when they were in the field, Cain talked with Abel, his brother. Perhaps they were discussing the accepted and rejected sacrifices. I can only see a strong arm uplifted and one crushing blow. Then murder came bursting into the world. Cain must have been horrified to see Abel's face in death. For the first time, he is looking at a face of death. Here is the finish of sin, death. This is not the only time jealousy will strike a fatal blow. Just like so many murderers yet to be born, Cain ran away. If I can only get away from this body, I'll forget. What he didn't realize was that to run and hide was the beginning of punishment. No doubt Cain ran many miles, but with every step he remembered the face and the horrible silence of Abel in death. Then Cain hears the voice of God again. "Where is Abel thy brother?" He answers, "I know not," which is a lie because Cain became quiet. "Am I my brother's keeper?" Did Cain really think that God did not know where Abel was? Does sin blind a person that much and warp his mind that quickly? If it were not written in God's word, one could hardly believe a man would speak so impudently when he realized he was talking to God. Cain's cold, defying impudence shows the state of his heart that led to murder. He could never have committed this crime if he had not first cast off his fear of God. Sin poisons the heart and drugs the conscience. Adam and Eve reaped the first fruits of the fall. To see their first son a murderer and their second son the murdered victim of an enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. God speaks again. "Now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shall thou be. Cain, you've made an enemy, not only of God, but of the earth also." This fills Cain with fear. My punishment is greater than I can bear. All of a sudden, he becomes a coward, afraid of everyone. "Every one that findeth me shall slay me." His main punishment would be the sorrow and regret he felt in his soul. Where did the fugitive go? No one knows for sure. We just know that he went out from the presence of the Lord. Went out. Two words that tell the sad and changeless story of the wages of sin. Sin separates. The descendants of Cain became the inventors of instruments of music or entertainment as a substitute for the presence of God. And that's found in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 29. It says, "Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they that have sought out many inventions." So many have sought out many inventions as substitutes. So then after that, we're going to go into, we talked about how the woman will be the one that will uh, have the redemption. So we're going to go into, um, she has another son named Seth. And at that time, when Seth is born, is when men will become to call back on the Lord again. So God gave Adam and Eve another son whose name was Seth. And I'm going to read Genesis 4:25 and 26. Get my light here. It says, "And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God said, She hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain had slain. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord at that time." So Seth was the one that renewed the righteous seed, and then men came to call on the Lord. So Seth begins the bloodline of the promised Redeemer. The corruption in which had become so great in the line of Cain overspread the whole earth. The wickedness of man was almost inconceivable. Every wicked imagination of the heart was evil continually, and deeds of violence was everywhere. The first civilization was founded by Cain, a murderer driven from God, which we find that in Genesis 6, verses 1 through 6. And it says, "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they had chosen. And the Lord said, My spirit, it shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be numbered in 20 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also afterward, that the sons of God came in into the daughters of the men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart." Because of all the sin that had been going on at that time until Seth had been born, who would be at the beginning of the where men would call upon the Lord again. No one among his descendants called on God. They ignored him. No doubt Adam and Eve looked with horror at the growing rebellion and impudence of their grandsons and granddaughters and great grandsons. They were depraved and putrid in God's eyes. But then, eventually, through the line of Seth, I believe, you have Noah, who found grace in God. And that's found in Genesis 8. Or chapter 6, 8, verse 8. And it just says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of God, of the Lord." So amidst this universal wickedness, one faithful man was found. To this righteous man, Noah, God announced his purpose to destroy the world. And that was found after in chapter verses 6 through 7. And it said, "It repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them." Because man had for a while had turned away from God. So at this point, after Cain and Abel, after they've kind of gone on and had children, and now we finally get to the point where we have, because the world at that time, after Cain had killed Abel, that the world became very, very wicked during that time. But the bloodline of a promised redeemer would come forth, that man would eventually come back to God. And we finally get to the point where now we have Noah that has come, and he is the one who, along with Seth, has begun to call on the name of the Lord. So Noah builds an ark. God told Noah to build an ark. God tells him, make an ark and make it of gopher wood. So God gave the world space to repent, but they would not. So God said, I'm going to destroy, and I need you to build an ark. So this is the conscience disposition that ends in judgment again because of man's sin. And he's now going to create the flood. So we have judgment coming against once more on the second time of man. So Noah was just, perfect, and walked with God. Only one of the other man, or only of one other man was it said that he walked with God, and that was Enoch. Noah had never seen it rain, had never heard or even seen an ark. But there was no water nearby to launch it, but God had said, make thee an ark of gopher wood. And so Noah set out to do just that. And we have Genesis 6:14, which I don't know if I read that or not. Actually, I'm going to read, I think, verses 14 through 16 in chapter 6. And it says, make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make of it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side of thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it. So God gave them, Noah, instructions of how to make the ark. So people ridiculed Noah. I mean, we don't know how long that it took Noah to build the ark. It could have been months. It could have been years. It doesn't really say. God just said, make the ark. So he worked on it, and his family probably helped him. His sons helped him to build this ark. So we really don't know how long it took him. I mean, it's a gigantic boat that basically is, I forgot how many football fields, as far as the length of it. So it probably took him, it could have taken him several years to build it. Who knows? It doesn't say in the Bible. God just said, build an ark. So people laughed at him and they ridiculed him, and they held their ribs with laughter when they heard that a flood was coming. To the people of that day, it seemed impossible that it would rain. To us today, it seems almost unbelievable that there is going to be a rapture. Oh, I've heard the story since I was a child, the scoffers say, but yet it is coming just surely as the flood came. Noah had to care for his family, preach, and build an ark. He was preaching to for the people to save themselves, of the destruction that God was going to come and wipe out with a flood. And people mocked him and laughed at him, thought he was crazy, So they ignored him. They fought against him. They laughed at him, But Noah had to care for his family. He was preaching. He was building the ark. He had to plant food for them to eat and also harvest it. His question might have been, how much time should I spend each day building the ark? He didn't know when the flood would come, but he knew he must be ready when it did happen. Therefore, he had to arrange his day carefully between taking care of his family, preaching, and preparing a means of salvation for the flood. We also must also be careful in arranging our day. We know that judgment is coming, and our preparation for it is the most important thing in this world. So Noah is warning these people while he's building the ark. He's preaching to them and he's warning them of the coming of the judgment because man has turned away from God and they're sinning. And man was created to be good and to live worthily. He failed that test of obedience and continued to drift in sin. Every evil possible was practiced by him. God gave instruction, guidance, and warning, but the love of sin continues even after we hear the cry, "Give us Barabbas." Sin spreads so fast it doesn't take long to spread from one heart to another. It is universal. In Noah's days, the whole earth was filled with wickedness. All were going to die. All were going with the tide except for one man, Noah. Noah was about 500 years old when he heard the call to build an ark. Boy, just imagine if I was 500 years old. But I don't think their years were different than ours now, so it's kind of hard to tell how old he actually was during those times before the calendar was. But he wasn't building it just for his family, but he preached and pleaded daily for others to be saved from the flood. And we read in 2 Peter 2:5. And it says that Noah warns of the coming judgment. It says, and spare not the old world, but save Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. A great wave of indifference engulfed the world of his day, yet the need was never greater. Today, the world is indifferent to the things of God, yet he is pleading with us. In one sense, Noah was not a very successful preacher. Out of all of his preaching, Noah saved only 7. But from those 7, he saved the whole world. Before the day of the flood, Noah and his family were in the minority by far, yet when the flood came, they were in the majority. Then on the last day, God called Noah and his family into the ark. Noah chose to go in just as much as the others chose to stay out. Of all the clean beasts, Noah took 7 in the ark. Of the unclean, only 2, a male and female. And then, in simple but impressive words, the Bible describes the horrible catastrophe. The Bible paints no scenes as human writers would. He sees nothing of death's struggle. We hear not the cry of despair. Only one impression is left with vividness: the utter destruction of all flesh, save Noah and his family. Oh, the horror of many clinging to huge rocks still above the water, with fathers reaching for their children and their wives clinging to them. Both man and wild beast were looking for safety. Maybe some pounded on the ark, thinking that Noah would let them in, but God had already shut the door, and once God shut the door, there was no opening it. The foundations of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. The waters rose 15 cubits above the highest mountain. For 150 days, The earth was a shoreless ocean, only one boat sailing without a human pilot. But God remembered Noah. Oh no, he didn't ever forget him, not for one moment. Was God just in bringing the flood to destroy sinful man? The answer lies in the history of his treatment of his creatures before this event. He had given Adam and Eve clear instructions about the consequences of sin. He had warned Cain before he murdered Abel, had called Enoch to walk by his side, had counseled with Noah, and with all of them he had walked frequently, that in his wonderful presence righteousness might become attractive to them. But now he says, my spirit shall not always strive with man. In other words, God's spirit strives with man as long as there is any hope of saving him, until in the depths of the sin, he is literally drives God away. What a judgment! The flood was purging and a corrupt generation, preparing the way for a better generation. In a certain sense, God does this from the age to age. He turns the earth upside down like a dish and empties it of its inhabitants. He sweeps the earth clean of each generation of men and starts with another, a new generation. This is accomplished through death. So basically, the constants of dispensation, basically at this point, ends in judgment by a flood. The first one was Adam and Eve getting kicked out of the garden. So Noah had built an ark. And the size of the ark was 1 cubit, which is 24 inches. The ark was 600 feet long. It was 100 feet wide and 60 foot high. The capacity of the ark was 3,600,000 cubic feet, which I guess from what they're saying, like 1,000 boxcars from a train could actually be put inside the ark. So it was huge. So we read from the circles of the size of the ark and its capacity. Actually, 1,310 boxcars could have been put inside the ark. The average size of all animals put together would be about the size of 2 household cats. So we see that there would have been plenty of room in the Noah's Ark for all that it contained, plus plenty of room for food. Skeptics say that Noah couldn't have built a boat big enough to hold all those animals, but according to the dimensions God gave him, it could easily have been done. There was never any definite length of the cubit in ancient days. Most common was the cubit of the elbow, that is, the distance from the elbow to the fingertip. There was also the cubit of the armpit, or the distance of the whole arm. Ancient Egypt had 2 lengths for the cubit at different times. One was the length of a newborn child. The other was the length of the king at a certain age. The cubit we are using is called the great cubit, which is the distance from the elbow to the fingertips, plus a hand's breadth. This is the size of the cubit given to Ezekiel by God. So In the days of Noah, we look at the coming Christ, and it kind of compares the days of Noah, of how it was in the days of Noah, and then it also compares to the coming of Christ, of what it's going to be during the time when God returns. So in the days of Noah, it says that wickedness was great in the earth. There was a large number of unholy marriages, many men of renown, the world unaware of approaching disasters. All the earth was corrupt. Noah's family enters the ark to ride above the flood, and then Noah eventually returns back to the earth after the flood. And in the coming of Jesus, in his time, when he comes, at that time, there's going to be evil men and sorcerers waxed worse and worse, just as in the days of Noah, there was the wickedness that was great in the earth. Marriage and giving in marriage, they still had in the days of Noah, there were still large numbers of unholy marriages. And then there's also the knowledge increased, and it was the same in the day of Noah. As a snare shall it come on them that dwell on the earth. And that was the same in the days of Noah, that there was unaware approaching disasters. And then we have blasphemers, unholy, unthankful, people who are unthankful, they're greedy, ungrateful. But yet in the days of Noah, you had all the earth that was still corrupt. And then we have saints caught up to escape the time of trouble. And in Noah's day, families entered the ark to ride above the flood. And then we also have saints return with Christ after the time of trouble. And here we have Noah returns to earth after the flood. So when we read Matthew 24:37 through 44, and also read 2 Peter chapter 3 through 7, there's a perfect parallel between Noah's day and our day. Like I said, just kind of forgive me. This is all new to me, and I'm really kind of nervous, kind of out of my comfort zone of doing something like this. So this is definitely a challenge. So Matthew 24 verses 37 through 44. Says, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what your hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house hath known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore, be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. And then we're going to read 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 7 through 8. think I need to get some better lighting here. Okay, so we have verses 3 through 7. It says, "Know this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lust, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that was then was, being overflowed with water, perished. But the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved until the fire against that day of judgment and the perdition of ungodly men." So even evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse. And since 1960, total crimes have increased by more than 300%, while the population has increased only 41% since 1960, which I imagine these numbers have changed by then. Violent crimes have increased. Every year, 5 million people are victims of violent crimes, murder, rapes, robberies, assaults. And I'm sure these numbers have also gone up, you know, tremendously over the years. So millions of people are victims of property crimes. You have arson, you have burglary, you have theft. You've got people marrying and giving in marriage. Um, you got divorce rates that are going sky high. Um, Now our knowledge has definitely increased. You look at all the tech stuff that has gone through the last 20, 30 years or more. It's just we're constantly learning, we're constantly coming out with new things, cell phones, just you name it. It's like we're progressing, we're with more and more knowledge. um you know Scientists, colleges, universities, we're learning constantly. "And as a snare shall it come on them that dwell on the earth. The flood seemed impossible, the rapture seems unbelievable," is what our mindset, men's mindsets are. Just like they didn't believe it in the days of Noah, a lot of people are not going to believe it now. In the days of God's coming, when he returns, people will not believe it. So we have different scriptures. We have, I think, Matthew 24. I think I read that one. I'm not sure. Okay, Matthew 24, 38 and 39. Just want to double check, make sure if I read it or not. Yeah, I did read it. It was just talking about the days before the floods, how there was drinking and marrying and giving in marriage. So I already read that one. And you have Daniel chapter 12, verse 4. That one says, "But thou, O Daniel, shut up thy words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. So that just tells us how the days will be when the Lord returns back. And you have Luke 21:35, which says, "For as a snare shall it come on all of them that dwell on the face of the whole earth." And you have 2 Timothy 3:2, which says, "For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetousness, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unfaithful, unholy." Just all the crime and just the way people's attitudes and stuff are, how their thoughts are, how their hearts are. We're going to have all this just the same, like I said, in the same time as Noah. There's just a comparison between, the days of Noah, how it was at that time when Noah was building the ark, how man was at that time, and how it's going to be before the Lord returns back. So 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 17 is when Noah steps into the ark. He enters the ark for safety, but right before the flood. It says, "Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord." And that's how we are going to be, like Noah that entered in, his family that entered in the ark for safety. We are going to be that way as Christ returns back for us. And we have Jude 14:15, where Noah basically returns back to the earth. It's kind of like I said, a sign of the judgment. And Jude 14:15 says, "And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." So this judgment of the flood will be as nothing compared to the last judgments that are coming soon to happen, when the small, the great, the ancient, medieval, the modern man shall stand before the judgment seat of God. The next event to occur is the rapture of the church. So we have to look at ourselves and ask, are we ready? Are we prepared? What if he came tonight? What if he came tomorrow? What if he comes from a month from now? No man knows when God's going to return, or the hour that he will return. And we know that life is not guaranteed. We know that, we could be healthy, we can be perfectly fine, and we can walk and go out and get into a car accident, or walk out in the street and get hit, or something bizarre can happen. So life is not guaranteed. And that just shows that we constantly need to be ready. We need to be prepared, for we know not the hour. And I just pray that you enjoyed this. And I will continue again probably tomorrow with the last. We did did this. So I will be actually starting with lesson 2. Probably tomorrow we'll get into a portion of it, and I might do another small video of just some more of my shared Bible studies that I've done on my own. And I just pray that you've enjoyed this, and if you would please like and share and help me kind of get this out. And just like I said, please bear with me. I'm really out of my comfort zone, but I just felt led that I need to kind of start a channel and just share God's word. And eventually, if I can get people to subscribe and eventually join I'd like to kind of change the avenue of the direction of my channel, and just have it be a time of sharing the word, sharing the Bible, verses that speak to you, that have helped you, that has um, spoken to you in some way or another. Just a time that we can just kind of fellowship together and encourage and grow in each other, and grow deeper in God's word and grow closer to God. So I do appreciate you guys listening, and I thank you for hanging out with me or watching it later on. And I pray that you guys have a blessed evening. Please be safe with all the storms going out right now. And I will see you the next time. Thank you so much.